What's a secret you found out that you were 100% not supposed to know? There was a year where I knew everyone's secret in my family. I was 16/17 first. I found out my dad was having an online fling with someone behind my mother's back after I heard him and my mom fighting. They made me swear not to tell my older sisters. So I didn't tell. Then I found out my one sister was dating one of her friends. Not a bad secret or anything, but she made me promise not to tell anyone else in my family. So I didn't tell. Then, one day my other sister asked me if I wanted to go to Starbucks with her. I was so excited because we never did anything together. Instead she took me along when she went to see her controlling and verbally abusive ex. I realized they never actually broke up. She made me swear not to tell our parents. I told our parents. My cousin was adopted. Apparently, his mom was never able to have kids, so they adopted but never told him. He's 36 now with a family and his father passed away last year. He still doesn't know. I was adopted as an infant and so was a neighbor's son who was about my age. They had moved in next door recently, so my mother befriended her. At some point, my mother mentioned to her that my brother and I had been adopted. We were both around 10 at the time. She confided in my mother that their son was also adopted. She then went on to say that their son did not know he was adopted and that if he ever found out they would leave the area out of embarrassment and shame. They were from the extreme rural south and had moved to a larger city to be more anonymous and blend in. Our mother had been extremely open about our adoption and even had paperwork to give us to track down our bio parents if we wanted to, though she wouldn't give us the info until we turned 18. I could never understand their desire for secrecy, being in a family that was open about it. Anyway, neighbor kid seemed to have a normal childhood as far as we knew. Went off to college, joined a fraternity that was known for drinking and partying a lot. Went on to develop alcohol dependence issues that continued into adulthood. He outlived both adoptive parents, but he passed away in the last 5 years due to an aneurysm related to a lifetime of alcohol abuse. Never learned if he figured out he was adopted or not, but clearly had a lifetime of issues he had trouble sorting out. I guess his adoptive parents had their reasons, and it wasn't any of my business. Just tragic. Miss you, Billy. I hope you're pain-free and resting well. My mum died when I was 11, and for the last 2 years of her life, she was involved in a love affair with my father's best friend. Apparently the affair had become somewhat known about in their circles and included a pregnancy which was aborted. I knew nothing of this until my new stepmother told me this one night when she was drunk about a month or two after she married my dad. I was 16 then. Oof, my stepmom told me details about my mother's infidelity as well. I was about 17 at the time and my mother divorced my dad when I was 2, so it wasn't even a relevant thing to bring up. But I've never been able to forget about it. I have older brothers. One of the brothers got drunk and told me the reason he does not speak to the other brother is that the other brother slept with his girlfriend at the time. He only found out when he was using the other brother's old laptop that he lent him and the messages on iCloud were not deleted. He was confused when he found his girl's name as a messaged person as he went into messages. My dad and mum have no idea this is what they fell out over. They thought it was over something else. When I was a kid, my mum was studying part-time. Every month or so, she would get together for study groups with some other mums who were doing the same degree, so I got to know some of the other kids pretty well. Two in particular, brother, Adam, and sister, Sally, were roughly the same age as my sister and I, so we hung out with them a lot. Adam wasn't very bright, and apparently had some behavioral problems which meant he had been moved to a lot of different schools. I got along with him alright. Sally was a year younger, but definitely the smarter of the two. She had a bit of a temper, and a very strong personality. Generally I'd hang out with Adam and my sister would hang out with Sally. We'd known them since we were about 8, and when we were about 12 or 13 Adam said he had a secret to tell me. The secret was that he'd had sex. This seemed very odd, because I'd never even seen him talk to a girl, let alone have any kind of relationship with one, and I said as much. Then he told me who it was. Sally. I didn't know what to say, so I just said yeah, okay, and carried on as if he had never said it. In my mind, I was sure he was full of shit. That evening I told my sister what he'd said, and she went pale. Then she told me that Sally had told her the same thing. Shortly after all this, my mum graduated and we stopped hanging out with them as much. I still saw them from time to time, and I'm friends with Sally still on Facebook. But I've never mentioned it to anyone. I had a brief friendship with a girl in my middle school, who one day confided in me that her mother wouldn't let her eat at home, and her younger sister attended the same school as us and would tell their mother if she ate at school and she'd be beaten for eating. She begged me not to tell anyone. I told my dad on the drive home, and within a few days she disappeared and I never saw her again. I don't care if my dad called the police, or if someone else did, or if something much worse happened. Someone I was super close to and totally in love with got insanely drunk and told me their darkest secret. Apparently their godfather was essentially a mob boss, and he watched them murder someone right in front of him. He then was forced to help bury the body somewhere in the California desert. He said that I was the only other person he had ever told and had planned on never telling anyone. The next day he blocked my number and socials. Pretty much never heard from him ever again after spending time together multiple times a week for over a year. That sheet was dark, and I partially wonder if he did it more for my protection than his own. Hanging out with my cousin one night 20 years ago. I'm in my 40s. She gets drunk and tells me she's been sleeping with our other cousin since they were in high school. I kinda stopped hanging out with her and him afterwards. Gross. 10 years later at a family gathering, his wife gets drunk and they start arguing. She tells everyone those two were banging and she shows pictures to the family she got from his cloud of her and him in positions. Gross. Now everyone knows. Female cousin is so embarrassed she is crying. Male cousin is shamed and leaves. They divorce later. Female cousin moves across the country. Male cousin lives alone and doesn't talk to anyone. I have a strange family. I was a CNA personal attendant for a wealthy family. Their grandson visited his grandparents while I was there and told them that he was going to ask his girlfriend to marry him. 3 months later we are seated at their summer camp having lunch and I always a little nervous at being forced to make small talk with judges and lawyers etc. asked how the proposal went, thinking I'd lean into that happy news. She was there at the table after all. Except he hadn't gotten around to asking her yet as something had messed with his planned timing of it. So I had let the cat out of the bag. I had known enough to be dangerous, but not enough to be filled in on any of the specifics. The mother of the son whose secret I had just spilled wanted me fired. The daughter who was in charge of the staff etc. said absolutely not and offended me. I felt so bad. I've always hoped that the whole mess became a funny anecdote that got to tell everyone when telling the story of how they got married, and they did. Not nearly as salacious or crazy as anyone else, but one time my mom was asking me for advice on what to do about my sister, who was naturally very smart but also very unmotivated. And my mother was starting to discover that my sweet, Disney-loving, horse-obsessed, chubby, glasses-wearing, country music and The Bachelor watching little angel was, in fact, a lying little bitch. I had known from a young age my baby sister was a very talented liar, excellent at eavesdropping and master manipulator. She knew that being a mousy nerd who read books all day and minded her business provided her the perfect cover to steal, lie and cheat her way into and out of everything. It sounds funny, but this girl believed in Santa until she was like 13 because she realized if she played along as more innocent it meant more presents. Clever. Anyway, my mother had sort of let it slip unintentionally that she had been testing my sister without her knowledge by reading her diary and her notebooks. This was before cell phones. And randomly slipping in questions to her about things to see if she'd tell the truth and began catching her in constant lies. This was hard for her to come to terms with. Long story short, After hearing this, it inspired me to sort of investigate further, where I discovered in my 20s that my mom had been reading my diaries and rummaging through my room my whole life, but she never let anyone know. I managed to show her evidence of how I discovered this and she went white as a sheet. I changed the subject though and never brought it up again. My dad was having an affair with his secretary for a while. I found out when I was about 10. My parents separated a couple of times over the ensuing years, but they finally stuck together permanently when my mom got pregnant again when I was in high school. He didn't stop seeing the woman until around that time, and she sent a baby gift to my mother consisting of all of the presents and letters and stuff my dad had been sending to her over the years of their affair. To this day, I don't know if my dad knows that I know. My mom tried to tell me about it when I was about 22. But I told her that I already knew. It was an ugly moment, and she was trying to tell me because she was trying to hurt me somehow. I do not know if my younger siblings know about the affair, and I do not know if my youngest sibling knows that our parents weren't living together just before they came to be. I'm in my 40s now, and my mom is in the process of being formally diagnosed with what we are all assuming is Alzheimer's. When we were home to visit last, my husband took her out shopping. As they drove by my dad's old apartment, she casually pointed it out and explained to my husband that it was where my dad had lived when they were split up due to his affair. So I guess it probably won't stay a big secret for much longer, and I am a bit at a loss as to how to approach it. I went for a drink with my lecturer as we did now and then. She got a bit wasted, which was unlike her, and confessed she hadn't fallen down the stairs, but that her husband, another lecturer I knew, but didn't care for, had broken her arm. I learned a lot from her about feminism and trauma theory, so it was a surprise and a shock to hear this. She asked me not to tell anyone. And I never have. I don't know if I would make the same choice these days or not. I should have spoken out, but at the same time it was her choice. She had young kids with him. Would they be okay if the family broke up? Would she and the kids be safe if it came out? In the late 80s, my Boy Scout troop went to Edwards Air Force Base for an overnight tour. On the second day they were showing us around the hangars, and the airman showing us around took us around this corner, and there in the hangar was an F-117 stealth fighter. It hadn't been announced yet. None of us had ever seen anything like it. The damn thing looked like a spaceship. The 8-man turns to us and goes, "You weren't supposed to see this." We were then all taken snacks in the mess hall while they decided what to with us. They later basically said, "Don't tell anyone and let us go." About 6 weeks later they officially announced its existence at a press conference. But we all knew what it looked like before it was announced. My childhood friend lived on my street and we grew up pretty close to each other's families. When she was a freshman her parents divorced and they moved, but close by, and we still went to high school together, and afterwards I worked at the same place as her and her mom, who was also a great friend at that point. I supported them with their new family dynamics, and over the years they were there for me as I had kids and eventually through my own divorce after my ex cheated with one of all of our mutual friends. I was having a hard time with dating after divorce because I still felt married, and I asked her how to get over that, and she confessed something to me when she had a little too much wine. While her daughter and I were still in high school and her older child, my friend's brother, was in college, she slept with her son's friend for like 3 months. They snuck around and had sex several times a week until her daughter nearly caught them, and then she called it all off. She would never have done that if she had been married, so she said that was how she got past that feeling married thing. I never told either one of her kids or anyone else that knew her, and I never will. I still stay in touch with her daughter and I saw her last at her mother's funeral. She died recently. She was a great friend. That my mum cheated on my dad when I was 7. I was sleeping and they were fighting. But they used to fight all the time very loudly in front of us, so honestly I was desensitized. I overheard their argument and found out my mum cheated on my dad. I was 13 during this time, and honestly it affected me so much that I remember crying on the bus home from school. I'm 18 now. After years of tension in my household, my parents finally rekindled their marriage. They don't know that I know. So I bury this deep within me, and it kinda sucks having to act like nothing happened when the world came crashing down on me when I found out. I still do wish they had gotten divorced during this period instead of holding so much hatred towards each other, because throughout my childhood they were so emotionally absent. And sometimes I question why my mum did what she did even though she had kids at home. I feel guilty for thinking she didn't care about me enough. Yes, my perception is screw changed, and yes, I can never view my parents the same way. 2 jobs back, I was outside having a phone call when one of the few women in the building walked by. I saw her get into her minivan and drive away. I'm still on the phone when I see her get out of her minivan in a parking lot 2 blocks away, same line of sight, and get into another vehicle. A few days later, I see that vehicle again in our parking lot, and I see another worker get out of it. Apparently they were having an affair for a while and really weren't hiding it real hard anymore. Her last name changed on her nameplate about 6 months later. She was fairly good looking, and I believe she could have done better. Don't know if they're still together, but I doubt it. The cleaner in an office I worked stashed a large amount of rotting chicken behind a cabinet by the stairs. It was won in a competition where a local radio station would deliver lunch for everyone in the office. They were aggrieved at not being offered any. Nobody was explicitly offered any, it was just laid out in the kitchen, but I guess they saw it as a slight not being overtly asked. It smelled like someone had died for weeks before the source of the smell was discovered. I didn't think them out, as I thought it was funny and admired their dedication to the pettiness. My dad was older than a lot of my peers. He was born in 1926, and he volunteered for the Navy in WW2. He went through basic training, which I can't imagine, and was deployed to a destroyer. On board, he was witness victim to an explosion. All of the bones in his hands were broken. They set them between 2 boards until he could be boarded to a hospital ship. They asked him if he wanted them to knock him out first, and he said no to the first one and then yes please for the second. That's not the secret. The secret is that he then took diazepam Valium every day for the rest of his life. My dad had PTSD, and I didn't know until after he died in 2006. My husband and I found my father-in-law's bio family through one of those DNA kits. We were excited to learn more about his family. My father-in-law was adopted by his parents as a baby and always thought that his parents were helping out a niece who got in trouble as a teenager. Win-win for everyone, right? Wrong. My Phil's bio mom had been married to a soldier in World War I, and while he was away got pregnant a couple of times and then sold the babies. When he returned he found out and divorced her, but she sold several more after that. We know of at least 7 siblings who found each other. My Phil was the youngest we know of, and all the others are now deceased. We never told anyone else in my husband's family. My Phil would have been devastated. He passed away recently, so there is no reason to tell the rest of the family now. Some of these are so dark. Mine not so much. At a previous job, I was required to be on call. Never once had an emergency. I'm the kind of person who gets nervous tics at unread messages or emails, so when something comes in, I pounce. Late one night my phone dings, there's a new email. I open it immediately, and it's from my boss Sia, small company, with a spreadsheet attached, every single person's salary. I have a strong, almost eidetic memory. I can still see the sheet in my head more than 10 years later. Just a glance at something significant was all it took to permanently imprint. Moments later the phone rings. It's my boss and he's panicking. Asks if I opened the email. I say nope. Just picked up the phone when you called. He sighs in relief and asks me to delete it without opening it as soon as I do check my email. Now, he may have been a boss that I once threatened to break his fingers because he put his hand above mine while we were at a conference, but he did pay fairly. I was a senior engineer at the time, and saw that I was paid very much in line with the other engineers, regardless of gender. Only employees paid more, besides him, were our chief architect, our VP, and 2 other engineers, one who had a PhD and the other had 20 years of relevant experience, all men. That my dad and his girlfriend couldn't pay the mortgage and were falling behind on payments. They hadn't been discussing a move for months. This wasn't in the plans. The house is being foreclosed. They're lying to me and my siblings, and since I found out, I've been hiding the truth from my siblings and hiding the fact I know from the two adults. I hate it. I 100% wasn't supposed to know, and I wish I'd never found out. Once when I was in my senior year or end of junior year in high school, there were these girls that were friends named Terry and Layla. Terry and had let Layla use her old iPhone for a while because hers might have been broken or her parents confiscated it, I can't remember. Well, when Terry got the phone back, the girl was still logged into her iCloud and it was still receiving text messages. Once she took a look at the messages, she put two and two together that Layla was dating our AP English teacher and that they were waiting until she was 18 to officially be intimate. Terry confided in one of my close friends, who then told me. But we weren't supposed to know, so we just forgot about it. This man was always very close and flirtatious with his female students, and it was kind of always a known thing. He had just got married or was engaged, I believe, with about 5 kids, which include a few daughters our age. Fast forward literally right after graduation, I was attending my best friend's graduation from another high school and my phone started blowing up. Her boyfriend found out and reported him. IDK what happened legally, but I know he was supposed to be going to another bigger local high school to become head of the English department. I tend to look him up every few years. He's a realtor now. My grandfather telling me about his dad and how abusive he had been to his 10 surviving children. How much of a drunk his father was. His father beat up their mother one day and threw her outside into a blizzard where she died in the snowy walkway, and he commented on the small snow drift which had built up over her corpse. After his mother died, he had to drop out of school in 6th grade and get a job to help support his dad and siblings. Unfortunately, the evil bastard never saw consequences besides dying alone of old age in the 1970s. When I was a kid, I overheard my parents arguing about money, which was normal since they had a restaurant. But apparently the FBI and IRS came to their work asking for their accountant, who didn't show up that day. She had stolen around $200K in taxes owed to the IRS and TABC, and did the same to other local business owners. They were saying we were going to lose the business and our house. My dad then started yelling about the expensive private school they put me in, and he said it was a waste of money because I am still stupid. That was a lot for a kid to take in. That my super judgmental and religious grandma had actually conceived my mom out of wedlock by a traveling salesman, and that my gay grandpa begged to take her on as a beard. He never outright said that, but I feel like they both knew. I'm still looking for my biological grandpa because I have his alleged info, but I'm not sure what subreddit to use. Also found out my mom had an abortion at 16 because she got knocked up by a guy named Joe on a date to the movies. I was a 16-year-old dating an absolute spunk puddle named Joe. My grandma thought we were sexually active, but nope. Probably should have paid more attention to my little sister though. She could have used the help. That my mom's stepdad wasn't her dad. She had always suspected it, but my grandmother took the secret to her grave. She died when I was 16. A few years later, my mom's stepdad married a horrible woman who ran everyone else off. When that happened, one of mom's uncles let it slip she had a different dad and helped us start tracking him down. He was a really cool dude. We got to have about 4 years with him before he passed suddenly. That my aunt had a shopping addiction and almost cost my family a bunch of land by letting their mortgage payments get behind. My granddaddy was not good with computers and had a problem with his credit card. So I helped him pull up documents that showed he was taking hits from this account which he had co-signed for the loan. It was part of my uncle's inheritance, about 40 acres which he had put a house on, so my granddad had given him the land. They refinanced the house after that to only have half an acre, and the rest of the land is still held with the rest of the parcel. They did the same thing for my other uncle, but it was because he was hurt and having problems, so they had already learned their lesson there. Anyway, finding out sucked because it really messed with my relationship with my uncle. We had been close, and finding out about my aunt and their issues he got distant for several years. We're good now, but I hated it at the time.